thank you for the introduction, Representative Kendrick. It's always a pleasure to work with you outside of the dome and inside of the dome. So we're making great strides when it comes to criminal justice reform here. Before I begin, I do want to recognize my colleague, Rob Woods. He's also here. He's our Smart Justice Community Engagement Manager. So the ACLU is very well in depth with the subject of criminal justice. And now I'll just send it over to my panel. I'll give you guys your introductions. You can introduce yourselves.
All right. Well, my name is Thomas Brown. I'm the former sheriff of DeKalb County. I had somewhat of a unique criminal justice career. I started out as an Atlanta firefighter. And I spent 13 years in the Atlanta Fire Department and came to DeKalb County in 1985 as the fire chief. In 1990, I was appointed the public safety director during the height of the crack cocaine epidemic. Started community-oriented policing in DeKalb County and did that job for 10 years. And I was appointed the interim sheriff in 2000 at the assassination of then Sheriff-elect Durbin Brown. Ran for the special election in March of 2001 and won 4 elections since then and retired in 2014 and been happy ever since.
Good afternoon. My name is LaDawn Blackett-Jones. Most people call me LBJ. Feel free to do the same. I am currently the city solicitor for the city of South Fulton. Prior to that, I served in the Georgia General Assembly for 2 terms representing East Point, College Park, South Fulton, and Douglas counties. I also ran my own solo criminal defense firm. Prior to that, I served as the Chief Senior Community Prosecutor for the Fulton County District Attorney's Office, where I prosecuted felonies and heavy recidivists. And also this year, after leaving the General Assembly, I've had an opportunity to lobby in our General Assembly for criminal justice issues, as well as try to help other people get elected to office through my other business, Politicoach, so we can get these criminal justice issues resolved.
I'm Louise Wozolewski. I'm the CEO of a technology company called Civilate. And we have built software that connects a returning citizen with their parole or probation officer, with corrections, and with health and human services. My background is all technology, but 6 years ago I was doing my MBA at Emory and the professor said new businesses start, small business, when people answer old questions in a new way. And my old question was, how could I create second chances for people like my father, who has a probation record?
Okay. I'm Lithonia Stroud, and I serve as a magistrate court judge here in DeKalb County, and I also serve as the chief judge for City of Decatur Municipal Court Traffic Court. I have presided over the DeKalb County Misdemeanor Mental Health Court for the last 8 years. And that is a court that provides a second chance for those who are thrust into the criminal justice system because of their mental illness. We have a 12-month program where our participants come and participate in the court and are directed to various programs, etc., to help address the issue of mental illness. And as I said, I've been doing that for the last 8 years. I've been in traffic court for the last 19 years. Prior to that, I was in private practice where we did a lot of family law, bankruptcy, that sort of thing is what we did there. I was appointed last year to the United States Department of Health and Human Services to a serious mental illness committee, and I serve that committee as well as we look at this issue throughout the country, and certainly work with it directly here in the county. So that's why I'm here.
Great. Let's give it up for our panel. A very prestigious panel that Representative Kendrick put together. When she called me and told me about this panel, I was very excited. Criminal justice, identifying problems, finding solutions. So to begin with, I think we really should talk about the problems that are currently in the criminal justice system. So in Georgia, you always have around 90,000 people who are incarcerated, around 50,000 people who are in prison, meaning they're there for over a year, and around 40,000 who are in jail. Georgia ranks 6th amongst the entire United States as far as incarceration, but we are the 8th largest state. There are other issues that we have to really look into, such as what we were talking about, mental health illness and addiction. Over 4 million Georgians have a criminal record. Georgia ranks #1 in the nation when it comes to correctional control. That means that Georgia beats out New York, it beats out California, it beats out Texas, huge states. But for some reason, we have either people who are in prison, jail, under probation, or under parole. They have some sort of government supervision on them. And this could actually be a tax on them as well, as they may have to pay for these type of controls. So let's start with Judge, excuse me, I just elevated you as a judge. Let's talk with Sheriff Brown. Okay. So former Sheriff of DeKalb County, dealing with law enforcement, could you tell us how elected officials in law enforcement can make a change in the criminal justice system, and how advocates who you see in this audience, what they can do to lobby their law enforcement officials as well?
You know, that is a tough one, because sheriffs, like other organizations, chiefs of police, fire chiefs, healthcare providers, they all have their own state organization as well as national organization. Georgia is unique in that the Georgia Sheriff's Association, much like the General Assembly, is kind of run and dominated by rural sheriffs, because it's just more counties, and so it's not a seniority pecking system within the Georgia Sheriff's Association. They all recognize themselves as elected officials, and they're top dog only in their communities. Within the Georgia Sheriff's Association is the most dominant of the rural or medium-sized sheriffs that can control the other peer group in that organization. And so when you look at that type of organization, a metro sheriff, for an example, may have a say within the group in terms of what position we should take on various legislative bills or bills we would ask our particular legislator to push forward for the Georgia Sheriff's Association. But it's that big body within that executive board that's going to control that. And then the dirty politics and the reality of it that I saw in my 14 years there, that most of those sheriffs like coming to those conferences because they just like being with their peer group. And whatever the group want to do, the most votes is going to carry that anyway, and then that individual sheriff is just going to have to control that politics within their own county. The best example that I can give you is the whole issue of gun control and how Georgia should address that. Well, the Georgia sheriffs took a very strong position on the maintaining of Second Amendment rights, whatever that meant in their own minds, and that is to, don't take our guns. And of course, I would be on that committee, and they would want us to take the position of the Georgia Sheriff's Association, and I would tell them, just straight up, I can't take that position. Not in my county. It's a much more liberal county, and the people that are dying from guns are dying from illegal guns. There's not enough controls to deal with the flow of illegal guns. There's not enough constraints in place to deal with mentally ill people getting a hold of guns. And that's just not a big issue in rural Georgia. So while that may be the Georgia Sheriff's Association, you will find positions, you will find individual sheriffs that will have different positions, and so you would never see them giving that soundbite at the Gold Dome when they're talking about that. It would be the executive director of the Georgia Sheriffs or the president doing that party line. And so I would have to come and speak to Representative Kendricks. Here's my position on that. And it's not necessarily the same position of the Georgia Sheriff's Association. It's more of a position that, quite frankly, the Democratic Party is, because sheriffs are also partisan. And I would never forget during this day when Sonny Perdue surprised everybody and won the governor's race. 2 days later, he was down at the Georgia Sheriff's Association's conference and basically lobbied about 50 sheriffs who was Democrat that they were going to change their party affiliation to the Republican Party. And that's exactly what they did. And so that's how it works there. So it's more of It's more of a thing where, in my opinion, lobbying the Georgia chiefs of police, who's going to basically be beholden to their elected officials. So then when you get to some of these big cities, Savannah, Augusta, obviously Atlanta, and as you see some of the counties in metropolitan Atlanta area going Democratic, then you would see their police chiefs moving in that same direction. So not much hope when you're dealing with Georgia sheriffs, because it's a lot of sheriffs who have jails that have a population of 75 inmates on a daily average are wielding a lot of power in terms of public policy that the Georgia Sheriff's Association would come up with.
It's good. There's so many things I want to go in depth about that, but law enforcement is only one piece of this conversation. So I think we're going to come back to you.
Sure.
And then we'll go to LBJ, because you worn pretty much every hat in the criminal justice system. Prosecutor, criminal defense attorney, and as a legislator. Could you tell us how you push for criminal justice reform in those areas? And really, how do you balance in between those two, being a prosecutor, as far as compassion compared to rehabilitation?
So I'll start with the second question first. I think it's just pretty easy. If you are a lawyer who is serious about the law and ensuring justice is there, you simply look at the facts, apply it to the law, and it is what it is, right? And then after you've determined if there's a guilt or innocence, you can also look at individuals' background and determine if there's something more appropriate through mental health courts or diversion programs, things of that sort, to give another opportunity. As far as getting more people or to make that change legislatively, I think there's a couple of things we can do immediately. First, we need to make sure that there are already some pretty accessible guidelines. President Barack Obama put out a list of things that we can do in the criminal justice systems to make it better, from our police chiefs to a number of other factors that we can put in place. We can actually ask our elected officials to fix those things. I was talking to Representative Bodie just a few minutes ago. There's also some low-hanging fruit that we're missing to increase criminal justice. Here's a good example. Getting your background checked. Many sheriffs, many police departments make it, you gotta jump through all of these hoops. It's difficult for me, even as a lawyer, to get the background of my client checked so that they can get their record cleared. Clearing somebody's record can change what they're able to do out in society, right? So we need to come back and take a look now that we've had some progressive swings. Now we have new people in office, new chiefs, new sheriffs, to say, what have we done to address those low-hanging fruit things that can make it better for everyone in the community, right? In Fulton County, Keith Gamage was elected as the solicitor. And within a month of being elected, he did some very transformational things solely because he was looking at it from fresh eyes. And he started doing these massive criminal justice reform, get your record expunged, right? Those are easy things that was directly within the power of every solicitor across the state, whether they chose to do it or not. And so I think that's what we should be asking for right now, particularly with Democrats and progressives being in the minority around the country, and particularly in Georgia. Let's look at some low-hanging fruit, things that we can change to go to our elected officials and ask for to make criminal justice easier, whether that's getting accountability courts or other alternatives to sentencing, public-private partnerships so that we can provide resources to the people who need them the most. These things are right in our reach. We just gotta kind of do it.
That's a great answer. Going towards you, Ms. Wasilewski.
Wasilewski.
Okay, perfect. You actually, I'm not even gonna go into as much of an in-depth question. I think you have a very unique story that would be great to share as far as how you got into the criminal justice system and how it personally affects you.
Yeah. I was 14 when my father was arrested for white-collar fraud, and I think probably his biggest crime was having an 8th grade education and simply not knowing the records he could have kept. But he took responsibility for that situation, and he pled the way you're told to, and nobody told him that it would mean he would never get a job again. Nobody tells you that when you get a sentence pronounced, right? You get 2 years and nobody says you'll never get a job again. So as a teenager, we lived with the economic consequences of that and the stigma, and I got my high school and my degree and went on with my life quite happily. And by the way, my father is still alive and doing well. But doing my MBA at Emory, the professor said, people start new businesses when you answer an old question in a new way. And I wanted to help families like mine, right? The system in Britain where I grew up is nowhere near as punitive as it is here. But as I started to understand that what we've really done here is criminalize poverty, and that the system here is very eager to make it hard for a family as well as for the offender, that just didn't make sense to me. And I'm a lot more educated now than I was about these issues, and I can see that the system is very complicated, but what I'm trying to do is make it possible for the person who wants to do the right thing and wants to get off paper to demonstrate that they are doing that, to know what they're supposed to do, to give them a voice. And I've discovered that also helps the officers who are trying to do the right thing in the system and often are overwhelmed as well.
Okay, thank you for sharing. Judge Stroud, it's on you.
Don't give me that look now. That looks me right here and give me a hard question.
I don't think it's a hard question. You are a judge. So as a judge, particularly dealing with mental health court, can you tell us the role that you play when it comes to people who come into your courtroom who have mental health issues, the type of treatment that you can give them? And is there anything that we can do to go further in accountability courts? Would you ask for more alternatives towards treatment or any other type of sentencing guidelines?
Well, first of all, our court is an accountability court, and you've heard of them as they continue to develop throughout the state of Georgia. And my role in that accountability court is to hold those participants accountable. What happens in our community, I think we see that diversion type court or the accountability court as something easy. Sometimes I think it's misconstrued in the community that if they are given an opportunity in these courts that they get off easy. And part of my responsibility is to help the community understand that that's not true. Quite frankly, they are required to do more with us, because the objective is to get them to a point of balance and stability for a period of time, and the requirement is 12 months based on Georgia guidelines, such that they feel good about where they are. It's a benefit to that individual and his or her family, and they return to the community at large in a productive type way. So what we do is I oversee them coming to court every month if they are given the opportunity to come into the court, where they are required to, first of all, meet with a treatment provider monthly and their counselor and their therapist, and they are also required to find out about NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, so that they know what their options are in the community. They find out about the Community Service Board, which is where they get treatment, and they are required to go for that treatment. And this is one of our case managers here, because they are under case management, very strict case management, that they report to weekly, and they're required to be in court. Right now, we are fortunate in that we do have some funding from the state that gives us an opportunity to have contract providers in for groups, for different cognitive groups, and a men and women's group for them, where they actually learn more about the illness. And education and awareness is one of the biggest components, because many people just don't know until they have that break that lands them in the DeKalb County Jail, because that is one of the requirements. And for the first time, they're finding out about mental illness, which is truly on the rise and is really impacting young people so much more now than we've ever seen. And for our county alone, we look at approximately, based on NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, based on their standards alone, we look at approximately 200,000 of our residents that may experience an episode in a year. But for serious mental illness, we look at quite a few more of our people in terms of having a serious schizophrenic or bipolar diagnosis. So it's very real, and we do see them in our jail. One of the last numbers that I heard from our Dr. Brickhouse, who oversees jail mental illness, is that in one given year they had about 45,000 arrests and mental illness, because they do ID and sometimes know them and know who they are over there. So our objective is to stop the revolving door of having them going in and out of jail, but to capture them, have them referred to our court, and the Solicitor General, who is the person that actually will allow that case to come, because at the end of the day, the balance is always about community safety. And when we get an individual into our court, to get them into treatment so that we don't have that revolving door. So I guess from the community standpoint is to understand what the court is and what its objective is. And just in terms of that awareness, so that you know that we are trying to address the population that ends up in jail. But what we want out there is something in place so that people don't have to experience the arrest in the first place. So if there was anything that I would be hopeful for, is that we could have that, because many families call the police as a last resort. Their intent is not to incarcerate their loved ones, but they're hopeless at that point, so they're calling for help, and that's how we end up with a lot of people in the criminal justice system.
I know the city of Atlanta has launched a pre-arrest diversion program where you can call the police, and a police officer under their first, in their investigation, if they do have probable cause to arrest you, but it's for something, maybe they have mental health illness or they have some sort of substance abuse. Instead of arresting them, they can actually call someone called a care navigator who will come out and take you to treatment or take you to a mental health hospital so you can have treatment. And that's diverting people from not having an arrest in the first place. So getting in front of, because I think you're talking more as far as pre-trial diversion when you're dealing with mental health.
Right.
So before you go to trial, you want something further before you even become arrested, before they put handcuffs on you, which is a great idea that's worked in other cities as well. I can go in, I mean, the comments that all of you have already contributed are great. I could talk to you forever, but we do have an audience. So if there are some questions that we can take from the audience, I can recognize you and start talking. Yes, please.
This one here is for the judge, but the young people that come into your courtroom, are they struggling economically? Like, have they been struggling to find jobs, for example? Have you noticed?
Most of them are. Many of them are homeless, which means that we can't take them into our court, because we have to have a way of monitoring and following up and keeping up, surveying them should we need to. For instance, we're looking at about 4 or 5 individuals now aged 21 and younger that the families have already given up on. So the situation is dire in the sense that we just need more, even on the national level, we acknowledge that we need more people trained to help this population, because it's really gotten ahead of us in terms of just having the professionals available to help them, and then identifying them at a younger age, because when we see them at 21 and 25, truthfully, the mental illness has been ongoing for about 9, 8 years at that point, because it's happening so much sooner now because of, you know, just their it's environmental now as much as it is from hereditary or something like that, because of the circumstances that young people are living under and living in. So yes, and who was it? I think you were talking about just what happens when they have a charge and that charge stays because they don't have the opportunity for accountability court. It impacts the opportunity to get a loan, to get an apartment, to do a whole lot of things are impacted. But one of the benefits of the accountability court is if they complete it, that those charges are restricted. And our new solicitor here in our county has agreed to do that, and to do it fairly quickly for those, because we have a lot of college students too. So young people are truly impacted, and more every day.
Right. I've noticed that it is harder for young people to get jobs now, and just from my own experience, I'm having to do so much more just to get recognized. Like, I'm having to do more and more unpaid internships just to get recognized for paid jobs someday. But my parents didn't really have to do that. I mean, when they were growing up, I guess all you needed just to get through college and you were able to get something. But now college degree doesn't really help you out much. So, you know, from past experience for me,
And that's
I'm having
just
to
you, so when you
do
tap
so
on
much
something
more.
else to it, it's
Yeah,
even
a lot
tougher.
of other barriers that may just happen. Rob? You had a question as well?
So if you don't mind, can I turn one question to like a triple play? And I'll be really quick. Wearing my ACLU hat right now, we are working on a campaign that's called the Smart Justice Initiative. Won't go into great detail, but the overall goal is to reduce the prison population by 50% and also significantly reduce racial disparities, because when you look at who's being locked up versus their percentage of the population, it's totally imbalanced. Three pillars that support our program. One is reentry, because we need to know where does it end. Once you're out of prison, then off of paper, but there are all of these restrictions. The second was, how do we further prevent people from going to jail, as the judge was just talking about, with the different programs. But how do we take that and take it outside of an Atlanta mentality and think of it in terms of Georgia statewide? And Sheriff Brown, you made a very important point about the resistance with the Sheriff Association. How do we start some type of conversation, not to persuade them, but at least get conversation going?
Well, I don't like to use the term resistance. I much rather use the term they're much more conservative as it relates to criminal justice. That's how those sheriffs are. And so, but I will preface that with, I think a great first step was Governor's deal, criminal justice reform. I think it was right on the mark. And a lot of the Georgia sheriffs did not embrace that reform at all. In fact, the former president of the Georgia Sheriff's Association left the association because he had some not too flattering things to say about the governor over that reform, and the association wisely said, well, perhaps you need to move on, which is what he has done. So I think that's a great first step right there. Then I think the next piece we need to look at, well, actually two pieces. Number one, the whole mental health piece. That is just absolutely huge. The medical budget in the DeKalb County Jail alone is about $16 million a year. And when I left office in 2014, we easily spent $600,000 on psychotropic drugs just in the mental health side of that jail. And that's for someone where the average stay in the DeKalb County Jail was somewhere around 42 days. And then they're in and out. So, I mean, is it money well spent? I don't know. If they stay on the medication, yes. If they don't, it is not. So those are some of the issues there. And the other piece is just general how we find the right people to be law enforcement officers. When we heard the comment earlier that poverty is your ticket to the criminal justice system, it is just something about being in a poor economic state that causes that segment of the community to do some things that will get you in jail a lot quicker than if you were to do it in another side of town, so to speak. And that's a huge piece when you look at the pay for law enforcement officers. And I'm not real sure that pay is the final answer, because you just can't legislate morality into how an individual grew up. And I think it's safe to say that our psychological examination we give to prospective law enforcement officers is not hitting the mark all of the time. And so when you're dealing with human beings, that's just a difficult piece. Did I come even close to answering your question?
Yes. I need some hit on all the points.
No, I think you did a great job. And I kind of want to flesh out what you said about Governor Deal's Criminal Justice Reform Council. It's a council enacted in 2011 by the state legislature, allowing the governor to put forth a commission that will look at criminal justice reform. That number I said before at 90,000, really in 2018 is supposed to be 160,000. Governor Deal saw that it was a big budgetary item, and he has enacted every year some sort of governor criminal justice reform package that's been passed by the legislature, bipartisan legislation. It has saved Georgians over $260 million, has lowered the crime rate, increased amount of re-entry. Unfortunately, June 30th, the council has sunset. So you no longer have a council for this. Now, you need to talk to your current people who are running for governor and see if they will reenact some sort of council in this way too. Because while Georgia has made some great strides, there are some other things that they can do as well. Any more questions from the
I
audience?
just need to add to that, because you made a great point on that. What the Governor Council did, in fact, to a large degree, was to push a lot of that cost at the state level to the county level. And they had to embrace that. But the silver lining in that is as we have progressive solicitors, progressive DAs, to look at those ways to, okay, now how can we reduce the number of people that are staying in the DeKalb County Jail who would have normally been at the state level? And then that will force them to come up with some more innovative programs to get that moving.
But I'd like to jump on one of your points about the Cut 50 group and the goal to reduce mass incarceration by 50%. I'm all in favor of that, but be aware the risk is we end up with mass community supervision. And statistically, Georgia is way ahead of anyone else in that respect. And the important thing is longer supervision sentences are not more effective. In fact, the science tells you that more intensive supervision can be counterproductive because somebody is less likely to keep their job if they have to keep going and reporting. And longer sentences of supervision just put more of a financial burden on people as they have to keep paying every month for their fees. So be really careful that mass incarceration reform doesn't result in just moving the problem. As a state, we have the highest proportion of our population under some kind of supervision.
So, and speaking of supervision, that's probably an area that we constantly keep talking about, private probation. You're dealing with people, right? And if it's not economically feasible for a local jurisdiction or for the state to provide probation officers, then how is it that a private company manages to do the same thing with less money than it would cost the state? It's because they're not doing it right, and they're not caring about people and the needs to make sure that they don't become recidivists. Now I get it, the prosecutor in me says probation is being incarcerated at home. That's what I explain to a client so that they don't have this weird sense of, oh, I'm just on probation, so they can't search my cell, my house, right? Yes, they can do all of that, right? So you have to be, but although it is jail at home, these are still people who have to get through the same metro area traffic, right? Who still got to get their kids from school, who still have to do all the things that everyone else has to do. And we have to find some kind of bridge, whether it's money, whether it's reorganizing sheriff's budget so that we can put the probation as part of it. Whatever we got to do, we have to really address in the same way that we need to hire qualified police officers. We need qualified people that can help with that particular population to help supervise and ensure that we're giving them quality, so we don't end up back in the same position.
Oh, I really want to get into a conversation about money and no cash bail. I just really want to. Well, I'm not. I know. I want to continue to hear from the audience if you do have anything, please.
So my question is for LBJ. And you mentioned the expungement program. Now, the City of Forest Park, we're looking to do so very soon, but I'm not sure exactly what it entails, what type of offenses, if it's just those offenses that happen in Forest Park. Can you just briefly go over that program with me?
Very short and easy. No, you can only be responsible for expunging the charges that were in your jurisdiction, right? So if you're working with your local prosecutor. However, you can still help people who live in your jurisdiction, right, who may have had those arrests other places, get through the process. It is not hard. It is literally combining the police department with the prosecutor's office and making sure you have criminal histories. The rules are very clear, right, on who can and who cannot get their records expunged, and a good qualified team of attorneys who can go through those GCICs, which any prosecutor or defense attorney, you can look at them with one eye open determine if someone is eligible to get their record expunged. I will be happy to connect you with Keith Gamage. If there is a science to it, just like running for office, there's a science to it. Do this, 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 and this, and it's not hard. So we'll definitely get you set up. And I feel like what we can do, back to your original question, is when you do it, not only announce to the people who need to come to your program, but announce to the rest of Georgia, hello, you can do this too. Guess how easy it is. This is how important it is. And then keep the data for the people in your district, because people are going to ask. So you can look at how did that affect the economy, recidivism rate, arrest numbers, all of those things, so we can show how important it is to do what is frankly just manpower. People who are already getting salaries. You're not even putting money out there to get it done, right? It costs more to advertise than it does to run the program.
And it's now, you said expungement, it's called record restriction now in the state of Georgia. And our solicitor here in DeKalb County just did a tremendous, and along with the DA too, I have to say, record restriction program in DeKalb County. And it was very, very successful, and they helped a whole lot of citizens. So she's right, just announce it, because the charges has to be in your area, but if somebody from some other part of Georgia had charges over there, then that's where they would need to come to address the whole issue. One of the benefits of our accountability court is to have record restriction, which our solicitor takes care of for the participants. So that's an important part of it too. So.
With record restriction in Georgia right now, you can only get an arrest removed. You cannot get a conviction unless it's under the first offender statute. Chris and I actually worked on this past legislative session trying to expand that, and that's something that hopefully we can all ask for, right? Something reasonable. If you have not been convicted of another crime and have not been rearrested or something in that realm within 10 years, you should be able to apply and get your record cleared, right, so that you can go back out and do what you need to do to survive. With some restrictions, certain crimes don't count, right? Everybody kind of feels the same. If you got convicted of touching little children, we need to always know that, right? But there are other crimes that we can do in a stair-step way to try to help make those changes.
Helps with employment applications. And housing applications is critical.
It's a great answer. And I love the way that you said that. Do it in your area, and then tell everybody else how to do it as well. Then you become a proponent, you truly become an advocate. Because like you were saying, it's not hard. It's not hard at all. Okay, I have a question in the back.
To the young lady with Forest Park, I'm with Communities United, and Clayton County is getting ready to have a restriction summit. One of the best partners that we've had is working with the Georgia Justice Project. They come in and lay it out step by step, and it's just a matter of us getting our solicitors and prosecutors together in police departments. So a great way to shadow, and it's coming up in September the 5th, I believe. Chairman Turner and our solicitor and DA have been in meetings over the last 2 months to set this up, and it's going to be a great event. So that will be the best thing for you to do. I think your police department is actually involved in it.
I believe Solicitor Gamage had a criminal
Yeah, one today.
Today.
Yeah, one
Right.
today. He's doing them, I think, quarterly. And I will tell you, when I went up to this past session, after you serve in the session, you have to stay out and have a cool-off period. So I had my cool-off period, and then I went up to the Capitol to get my little badge so I could be a lobbyist. And the woman on there saw that I was lobbying for criminal justice reform. She was like, I am going to get my stuff, to get my record cleared. Do you know that I worked in the cafeteria of where, all our state offices are for 8 years? But somebody in the ethics office saw me and saw how hard I worked for 8 years, and they gave me a job in spite of that record. But she was so excited, and she already knew about the crime. So people care about this, and they really need this, and it's low-hanging fruit. So good job that you guys are doing that.
Could you go further? Because you said only arrests can be restricted, convictions can't. Could they advocate for certain convictions to be taken off? Could you talk to your local legislator? Like, how would you go about that process?
Absolutely. You can absolutely lobby for it with your local legislator. So I will tell you, this past session, when we pushed that bill through on the Democratic side, the Legislative Black Caucus, they're all for it, right? That was an easy sale. We were still trying to get over to the other side, but there were several Republicans who know criminal justice, who understand how important it is. Here's what I think that we need to do next, is making it down to the numbers. right? Making it make dollars and cents. If we can show you how many people's records would be restricted, then increasing the number of people who can get jobs and housing and things of that sort, and what that means to Georgia, how many more people will that be for Amazon to come and apply for those jobs, right? We need to really break it down into numbers so people can understand how to get more. So definitely ask your legislators, whenever they have their town halls and they're asking for what do you want me to do or what's important to you this session, like, oh, we got an easy one. We just need to expand something that you all have already expanded to make it a little bit more easier for us to get jobs and help the economy. You know, you always gotta make it about money.
Ms. Bond
I'm
from
sorry,
Pardons
yes.
and Parole. Yeah, I was gonna say, for the ones that cannot get, taken off, the Board of Pardons and Paroles has all clemency power in the state of Georgia. And there is an application on our website. You can apply if you've been crime-free for 5 years to get a pardon. And so many people don't do that. I mean, we get applications where someone has been pardoned 20 years, they've been crime-free for 20 years or whatever, they haven't done anything, they've been living a productive life, and all they have to do is ask. So, again, I would recommend if you don't fit in that category where you can get a restriction, you can still apply for a pardon. That is another avenue that already exists without any more legislative changes or anything. Fill out the application. It is involved. Now, you have to give some information, tell us where you work, explain what's going on in your life right now, and there's a face-to-face interview. We actually send someone out to meet with the individual, but that is an option that so many people aren't even aware of, and they don't apply.
May I ask, I know she's not on the panel, but I help clients get their firearms rights restored through that same application. You saw my name before, haven't you? How many people would you say are taking advantage of that opportunity to do the pardon?
Not many, compared to the number of people who have gotten convictions in this state.
You're gonna start seeing some more.
Not many at all.
That's just because the community doesn't know about it, or?
Yes.
I think it's awareness. On our website, and I'm here today.
Yeah.
I am on the board, I've been on the board since 2016, and my goal is to try to begin to educate people about what's available to them. We do a lot of work on the Board of Pardons and Parole that people just aren't aware of, so I'm here to answer questions.
Oh,
About to
you're
get
gonna
busy.
get a lot of them. Judge, you have something?
I'm gonna
to
have
add?
to excuse
Oh, I'm
myself, but
sorry.
if there are any other questions, we do have a website that you can take a look at for the Misdemeanor Mental Health Court, and it's all spelled out, DeKalb misdemeanormentalhealthcourt.com.
Thank you for your time, Judge. You can give her a hand of applause. That, I think we're supposed to wrap up around 4 o'clock. So if you guys could give one last statement about how people can get involved in their communities, or any other type of words of wisdom.
Sure. Just, you know what, you guys, it's not rocket science. Just really figure out what it is that you're gonna do each year. And I know I was preaching to the choir in this room right now. But what can you do to get other people to get out and vote? Get other people registered every year, and then make sure that you're using that time to talk to your elected officials to get things to happen. Just do something every year, and I promise it can make a difference. And please y'all can contact me on the web. I'm at ladonjones.com.
I would just say, just stay engaged. We obviously need to get those individuals that go to the poll to vote at the top of the ballot to go all the way down the ballot, and just stay engaged and let people know what's important. And when we find little bitty things like what we just heard from Pardons and Parole, aggressively get that message out through the Georgia Association of County Commissioners. I doubt that they know. That sounds like a great presentation to be made to the Georgia sheriffs. I was a sheriff for 14 years and I did not know that. The Georgia Chiefs of Police would probably need to know that, because a lot of police chiefs want to integrate former criminals back into society, because they know that if they can't get a job, if they can't protect and provide for their family, they're just going to see them again. So they're not just beasts out there. They want to be a part of the solution, and so that's the kind of information that just needs to get out.
Okay.
So I'm not the elected person, right? I'm just a citizen. But what I've learned is there's a couple of issues. We have a lot of people in our prisons who are old, like older than me. And, you know, when somebody is over 40, their odds of reoffending have really gone down, right? We should be using compassionate release more, right? We should just plain be doing more compassionate release. And everybody goes on about non-violent drug offenders, and we should help those people. Well, with the governor's reforms, a lot more of the people inside now have more serious offenses in their backgrounds. And we cannot throw somebody away because they happen to have got prosecuted as under a violent offense. When you actually look at what it is, there's a whole range of things that count as violent offenses, and a lot of them would not count as a violent offense if they had happened, you know, 30 years ago. You know, something in a school playground or, you know, a barroom brawl is not the same as what a lot of us think of as violent offenses. So we've got to start thinking as a community about what we do with people who are not non-violent drug offenders.
Well, Representative Kendrick, since you are the host of this
No,
forum, do
just
you have
thank
any
you
last
to
words?
our panel. If you give them another round of applause, that would be great. So this is a good discussion. So me and Representative William Bodie, wave your hand, William Bodie. I'm a lawyer, but he practices this type of law. So he's our resident expert on the Judiciary and Civil Committee. So if you have any bills, just give them to him. But we appreciate you coming and listening to this very, very important topic. And I know they have a similar conversation going on next door. But thank you so much, and please speak to our panelists if you have any more questions. Thank you.
Thank you.